So bring out the pitchforks. I know, I haven't listened to it, which is crazy because I don't want to say like I love murder, but you guys know I love thrillers because I didn't expect to get as much out of it. I think I already said that. Like I know what's happening, but I have no idea what's happening, so. Hey everybody, it's Audrey and welcome back to Chapter and Converse. If you are new here, welcome to the channel where we talk about all things books, reading them, writing them, putting them on TV screens, all sorts of other stuff. And today I thought I would do a mid-month check-in. I have finished, there's 5 books I want to talk about. I have 2 that are in process, and I was so nervous about like picking the wrong book to start off the year and starting in a reading slump, which is so silly because I'm also actually listening to a book that's all about like manifesting. I am only reading good books. I am only reading amazing thrillers. All good things are coming my way. But I wanted to check in about these books, like I said, because one of them is coming out the end of this month, so I definitely wanted to chit chat about it. And then the others I just wanted to chit chat about because that's what we do here. So let's start talking about the books I have read so far in January. The first book I wanted to talk about is Blood Wedding by Pierre Lemaitre. And it's probably not how you say his name, which I'm so sorry. I never took French and I'm killing it. Not in a good way for a change. But this is a book that I have had, I bought it, I want to say like end of 2018-ish, and I picked it up after seeing April from Getting Hoogie With It talk about it and like rave about it basically. And this is a dark, twisty thriller. I didn't know much about it going into it, and I would say this book and another book I'm going to talk about, you need to go into pretty blind. So all I'm going to tell you is basically what unfolds in the first couple pages. It's all I knew going into it, and you just kind of take it from there. But this book, it was translated from French. I want to say it came out like 10 or so years ago, and this is very unreliable narrator vein because Sophie is a nanny, and Sophie basically suffers from blackouts, and not from drinking, not girl on a train type of thing, but it's one of those things where like she'll wake up on the kitchen floor and not know how she got there, or she'll sort of like come to in a cafe even though she's awake in the cafe drinking a coffee and not really sure how she got there. So when this book opens, for some inexplicable reason, Sophie has decided to be a nanny, and she takes care of the 6-year-old boy for this family in Paris. And she wakes up that morning at the house, goes to check on him. She's alone in the house, and he's dead. And not just like a little dead, like murdered, awful, like rough, like dead, very dead. And she's got no memory of what happened, and she is convinced that she's the one who did it because she's got some sketchy stuff from her past apparently, and she goes on the run. And this is all like first couple pages of the book, and we are on the ride with Sophie. So I will say, having no idea where this book is going to go, this book definitely surprised me in a lot of ways. Lots of twists and turns, lots of kind of different ways it could have gone, but of course didn't go the ways I thought it was going to go. And there's a whole lot of you just kind of not knowing what's happening. So I would say you need to be comfortable with sort of being uncomfortable in that way. And there were moments where I wasn't comfortable with that. So I would say like opening scene had me for all these obvious reasons. And I would say like it, not that the pace was slow, but I would say it took me like a good 40 or so pages to like really hit a stride. And it was definitely, you know, we're in Sophie's head and her head is a little all over the place. So you're kind of in that like unsteady footing is as best I can explain it. So I enjoyed it as a whole. I would say there were moments where I thought we could have like clipped it up a little bit and been maybe a little bit more concise to keep things moving. But at the same time, I was never not compelled to pick it up to find out what was going to happen next. There's like a diary entry format, which I like at some stage of the game. There's some of it that's sort of just straight narrative. We're in and around Paris and suburban Paris, if you will. So I enjoyed the story. This is definitely on the dark and twisted side. And it says on the front, a deliciously dark tale of obsession, betrayal, and revenge. So I would recommend it. I would give it a go. I know April said that she had read another one of his books after this, and she didn't love it. He does have a trilogy that I think follows like a detective or inspector or something. So I'm curious to check that out. I will definitely be open to reading more by him. But yeah, if you're looking for sort of some dark, twisted story. This was definitely a good one. Definitely like some unlikable characters, just a lot of just uncertainty about what's going on in a lot of different ways. And I think it was like that feeling of being uncomfortable that I didn't love, but at the same time, like I enjoyed being uncomfortable reading the story. So happy I read it, happy I picked it up. Definitely a good one to read. The next book I want to talk about, which is another one that you need to go into super blind, because otherwise I think there's just too much risk of spoilers or chit chat or any of that, and that's The Other People by CJ Tudor. I won this book as part of a Goodreads giveaway. So this is an art copy. This comes out, I want to say end of January, and I think it's like the last Tuesday in January. I'll write it down below when this comes out. But this is her most recent book, and I loved it, you guys. And again, I went into this one super blind. So kind of opening page premise of the book is Gabe is driving home from work. He is stuck on the highway. He is late. He knows his wife is going to kill him. He needs to get home to his wife and daughter. His phone is dead. It's just like, if it could possibly go wrong, it is. And he's super frustrated. And he's sitting there in traffic and he's looking kind of cars ahead. And a couple cars up, he sees kind of like this car that catches his eye because it's got all these weird bumper stickers on it. It's kind of like a beat up looking car. And all of a sudden in the back window, this little girl appears. And she mouths the word daddy. And it's his daughter, Izzy. And that's not his car. And he is convinced that Izzy has been kidnapped. So traffic starts to open up a little bit. He tries to chase this car, loses the car in traffic, pulls over at a rest stop, calls home. A detective picks up the phone and is like, you need to get home right now. It's about your wife and daughter, and they're dead. So we instantly fast forward 3 years. Despite all evidence to the contrary, Gabe is convinced that his daughter wasn't killed that night, that he saw her in the car at the same time that supposedly the police were there finding her body. And he has been driving up and down this road for 3 years trying to find that car. So this is a story, I mean, you talk about a father's grief and just his inability to let go of what he believes is the truth. And this story follows Gabe and people that he meets and sort of are in his life now. And we start to just get on the path with him. And I don't want to tell you anything else because I don't want to risk spoiling anything. But I would say I thoroughly enjoyed this book. It was not pure perfection for me. There was one element that I'm still sort of like, yeah, was that necessary? And then there was one part that I felt played too much on the coincidence factor when it could have been plotted to get to the exact same place and it would have felt more authentic to me, if that's the right word. So not a huge fan of coincidence, but all in, I enjoyed the characters. I enjoyed the story. Again, twisty-turny. I'm just a big fan of CJ Tudor's writing. I love The Chalkman. I read that last year. I picked up The Hiding Place. Order of videos is still something I'm working on when I'm filming them, but that will show up in my book outlet Boxing Day haul. So if that's already out, I will link it for you guys if you haven't already seen it. And if it's not out, well, stay tuned and mark your calendars because it's coming because I've already filmed it. But anyway, I really enjoyed this book. So I would say if you're a fan of CJ Tudor, definitely pick it up. It is a very solid read. If you haven't discovered her yet, there's no better place to start. Her books are all standalones, but I definitely enjoyed. They're very like short, quick chapters, kind of leaves you on the edge of your seat. There again is much like with Bloodwedding, there's that feeling of uncertainty where you're not sure where it's going. You're very much, I don't know if I was listening to this or reading this, it doesn't even matter, but I was doing one of my writer education bits. And the quote was sort of like, get into the scene as late as possible and leave as early as possible. And it's about how to write, good, clip, quick, good, solid scenes. And I think CJ Tudor does a great part of that because you're in the middle of the story, you don't know what's going on completely, and it starts to unfold in different ways. And I just love that not knowing, but it all connects at the end and it all makes sense. So it feels very methodical in the way that she's doing it. But so gracious, again, to Goodreads, CJ Tudor for doing these advanced copies. So happy I got it ahead of time, devoured this baby in a matter of days. The next book I want to talk about, I am still having conflicted feelings on. And it's the first book I read this year. I kind of sat on my Goodreads review for a while. I have since put it up. If you guys don't follow me on Goodreads, I do reviews for everything that I read, and the link is in the description box below. But I'm still feeling somewhat conflicted about it because there were parts of it that I still like absolutely love, and there were parts of it that I just like totally didn't. The conflict is real, but it is Never Have I Ever by Jocelyn Jackson. And this is a thriller that I have heard so many tremendous things about, and I like totally get that on a certain level, but then on another level, I don't want to say like I don't, but I've read better. How about that? I've read better. So the premise of this book 100% had me. So Amy is one of the moms in town. She is married to this guy Davis and has his stepdaughter who's 16-year-old, and then they have a new baby together. And then there's a bunch of other moms in town with babies, kids, toddlers, all sorts of things. And they do a book club. So they're hosting it at Amy's house. Her best friend Charlotte is actually the host of it, and a bunch of other ladies. And it's sort of like a little bit catty competitive-ish with the women. And it's like a little Desperate Housewives in that way, and kind of reminds me a little of Sherry LaPena with like the kind of the small town someone we know, just sort of all the different neighbors. And the book opens at book club, and there's a new neighbor in town, this lady named Rue, and she's super mysterious, and she's definitely like that artist, cool girl kind of a vibe. She has a teenage son, and she invites herself to the party. Nobody knows much about her, but it's like they're all in awe of her in some ways because of her mystery, and, you know, they just don't know enough about her. So sort of the stranger in town. And Rue basically comes in, and I wrote this in my Goodreads review, like, she stirs the pot as easily as she stirs the gin and tonics at the party, and basically, like, gets these ladies drunk at the party, except our dear Amy and her best friend Charlotte, who's pregnant. And these ladies start spilling secrets during a game of Never Have I Ever. And these are, like, grown women in their 40s. And what happens sort of at the end of, this is like chapter 1, the end of the book club, is Rue is kind of like razzing Amy a little bit. And it's kind of like a wink, wink, nod, nod. I know your deep, dark secret, Amy. And instantly Amy is in panic mode because Amy's got some deep, dark secret. And nobody knows about it. Not her best friend Charlotte, not her husband Davis. Like, nobody knows. But Rue apparently knows. So I'm hooked. I'm in. I want to know what the secret is. I want to know how Rue knows what it is. I want to know what the connection is. I want to know what the heck Amy did. I'm on for the ride. And then what winds up happening is we flash back in time in chapter 2 because we need to know what happened. But I felt like the story completely dragged at that stage. Like, I felt like we was just like foot on the brakes. And then for like 20 or 25 pages, we're in the past, and it just felt totally slowed down. So it was all information we needed, but I felt like it could have been more concise. And then boom, we're in chapter 3, and we're back to the present tense, and life is good. And then like needle off the record, chapter 4, we're back in the past again, and it slowed stuff down. Fortunately, after that point, we're back in the present tense, and we flew. But I would say there were a couple points, like in the first 40 or 50 pages, where I could have DNF'd this book, and I was kind of like, maybe this isn't for me. This is the first book I'm reading this year. What the heck is happening? This is supposed to be amazing. So we cruised through the story, and I will say the core of the story, I thoroughly enjoyed it. I thought Rue was a great villain, so to speak. I liked the cat and mouse with her and Amy. I liked all that Amy was doing to protect herself and her family. I also enjoyed all that Rue was doing to be a horrible human being. So I definitely enjoyed the relationship between the two women that was going on. And all in, I enjoyed it. But I will say I didn't love the ending. I felt very Silkwood Shower at the end of this. I think it could have been done better. I don't know if it was for shock value. I don't know if it was to be, I don't know, to bring like an issue to the surface. Like, I don't really know what the thought process was. But I didn't love the reveal. And then I didn't love sort of after the conclusion, it was like not a formal prologue, but epilogue, but it felt like an epilogue. And like, I just didn't need to know. So again, get in the scene late, leave the scene early. I felt like we could have done without that. So I felt like there was like some drag at the end. And then there is this very solid message. So again, Amy has a teenage daughter. Wow, that was New York. Daughter. And there's a message between Amy and her about respecting yourself, and it's about like her daughter dating and things like that, and about like having self-respect and having people treat you with respect in your body and your decisions and your choices and having agency over your choices. And I thought the message was good. I didn't think the context of how it happened was great, and I thought that could have been better. So that probably sounds vague and disconnected, but it's part of the story. So all in, I wish I loved this more than I did. I 100% will read more by Jocelyn Jackson. Like I said, so much of the core of the story I very much enjoyed. So much about a lot of the characters I really enjoyed. Amy is like a deep sea diver, which is a huge part of the story. I couldn't have cared less about that. So when we went into like the technical part of that, I kind of was a little bored. It sounds like I didn't like this book even more than I said I didn't like this book. So it was a solid psychological thriller. There were some elements I didn't 100% love. I do love the cover and I think it's beautiful and I am going to keep it. And I do think I learned a lot about writing a solid villain from this book. So again, so many people love this book, like hands down. Tons of it I did love. I did think there were some pacing issues at the start, but once it got going, off to the races, and I just devoured it till the end, even though I didn't like the end. The next book is an audiobook, and that is Dare Me by Megan Abbott. And this show is on USA here in the United States. It just came out as like a limited series. And I had heard about this book. I actually owned this book when it came out. And I think I just unhauled it without ever having read it, which I don't even understand what that's all about. But it probably just wasn't the book for me at the time. This time around, I have to say, so much like with you, with Carolyn Kepnes. So I saw that Dare Me was coming out on USA. I watched the first episode. I was hooked, and I literally was like DVRing it. I need to get this book and I need to read it before I go any further in the series. So I was able to get the audiobook from my library instantly. I listened to it, devoured it. I loved this book. And it revolves around a high school cheerleading squad, but it's not a YA book. This is dark on multiple levels. There is a mystery to it, but at the core of it, it is about these two best friends, Beth and Addie, and Beth is top girl captain. Addie is like second in command, her lieutenant. They've been best friends forever. And in walks new cheer coach, Colette French, and she is kind of not so much mysterious, but there is just something about her. She comes into town with the mission of like turning these girls into like the best squad possible. And this is not like your bring it on type of a cheerleading story. And this delves very much into the darkness of female friendships at a level of being in high school, the competition between them, the really, even like Mean Girls isn't even like the right thing. Like I feel like it's more like Heathers, where the horrible things that you will do to people when you feel that they have betrayed you, when you feel like they have wronged you, when they're not showing up for you. And Addie very much winds up sort of under Colette's spell, so to speak. And this is not witchcraft. This is not any of that kind of stuff. This is just solid contemporary mystery. And she's basically seduced by Colette. And Colette so she's married. I want to say she's like in her late 20s, and for some unknown reason, she like invites the girls like into her home. She like drinks with them, she parties with them. She really like brings them into her world. And a lot of the girls are in awe of her, and some of them like kind of just don't get it. But Beth, top girl, instantly is just not having it. And part of the issue is Colette is sort of dethroning her and saying like, you're not top girl, like there is no guarantee that this is who you are. So it creates this competition between the girls. It creates this competition kind of for Colette's attention. It creates a lot of really difficult dynamic between Beth and Addie. And it's just very dark exploration of female friendships. And sort of more than that, it also, I was not a cheerleader in high school, but it exposes sort of this very dark side of it from a trigger warning standpoint about the eating disorders, about the competition for looking their best for their bodies. There are some parts of it that are difficult to read in that sense. Sort of the lengths they will go to as athletes to be the best. So there's also sort of like a darker side to cheering that you see in this. And then the mystery part of it is there's a suicide that impacts all of them. And it's sort of how people get pulled into this, and then the investigation of the suicide. So there are so many layers of, again, this darkness and this betrayal. And I just loved it. I loved Megan Abbott's writing. I thought there were so many great lines in this. Again, I just thought it was such an interesting story about the girls, both as friends and then the relationship with Colette, and then Colette in and of herself. So I definitely need to be reading some more Megan Abbott, because this was great. This came out, I want to say maybe like in 2012 or something. This has been around for a little bit. And as usual, I'm late to the game. But I very much enjoyed it. I would highly recommend it. The TV show, I'm going to do a whole separate video talking about this, but I will just say, so far I've seen 3 episodes of the TV show, and they are like here and here. Like, there's so many differences, there's so many changes. So far, I feel like what I loved about Colette in that seducing of the girls is not happening in the TV show, and I don't know if it just doesn't translate. Megan Abbott adapted the book to the screen, so I'm curious about some of the changes that are taking place. I'm wholly invested in the TV show. I will continue to watch it, but as a book, I thought it was great. I thought the audiobook was terrific. This is one I'm definitely going to have an eye out for, to see if maybe it shows up on Book Outlet or something for cheap, because I would love to have it on my shelf and actually read it again. But what a unexpected, unplanned, wonderful surprise of a book. Highly recommend. And then the last book I listened to is Stay Sexy and Don't Get Murdered by Karen Kilgariff and Georgia Hardstark, who are the women behind My Favorite Murder podcast. And Shame Spiral. I have never listened to My Favorite Murder. I'm totally down with podcasts, and this is like one of those ones that it's like, I have it, I haven't listened to it. And I was listening to Gabby from Gabby Reads talk about the book, Stay Sexy, and she was like, you have to listen to this, get the audiobook, it's so tremendous, they narrate it, just do it. So I like instantly like went on the list at my library, and this was probably, I don't know, this could have been like back in November or something like that. So it literally just popped up as being available, listened to it, and I loved it. And I didn't know what to expect. I hadn't read anything about it. I sort of picked it up once in the bookstore out of curiosity, but I was already on the wait list, and I wasn't going to just out purchase it because it sounded like the audio was definitely the way to go. And I kind of just assumed it was going to be them talking about true crime, like on their podcast. But this was actually a really interesting, almost memoir of the 2 women, and I didn't know anything about them going into this. And like, I'm not even kidding, I want to say like one of the first vignettes, so they're all like in short essays and they alternate between them talking. Like, I cried. Like, I literally, there were like some gut-wrenching stories, and they talk about everything from their family, their friendship, addiction, rehab, drug use, the fascination obviously with true crime and how they got to it, their careers, just relationships, ex-boyfriends, marriages, all of it. And it was such a fascinating look into these women for me and their friendship. I completely loved it. I thought it was a really, really good book. I did not expect to get as much out of it as I did on a personal level. I didn't expect it to be, I guess, as personal as it was. And again, I just went into it blind, thinking it was just going to be more murdery type of stuff. And there definitely was some murdery stuff to it, but it's a lot of personal experiences, like I said, and even like a really frightening, like cautionary tale about, you know, like trusting your gut and not getting into bad situations. And, you know, they have this thing on their podcast about like politeness and, you know, winding up in circumstances or situations you don't want to be in because you don't want to offend somebody else. And it's pretty scary kind of how difficult situations or bad and threatening situations you can be put in, or you put yourself in, when you don't listen to your gut or you're afraid of offending someone. It was so emotional on so many different levels. There were also parts of it that were really funny, and I very much felt like it was hanging in your kitchen with your best girlfriends, just listening and chatting and just all of it. I really enjoyed it. This is another one that just took me by surprise. I didn't know what to expect. It popped up as mine, I instantly listened to it because you only had a couple days to listen to it, and I'm so glad that I did. So I would 100% recommend this book, especially if you're a fan of the podcast. You probably already know what you're getting into. If you're not, if you haven't listened to it before, I definitely think it's a worthwhile listen, and I will definitely be listening to their podcast now. So far, so good for 2020. I am excited about the books I'm reading. I just started reading The Escape Room by Megan Golden. I'm literally like 15 pages in, so when I say just, I mean just. I know the core of the story, so the setup has happened, and now we're in another chapter, and I have no idea what's going on. So we'll see what happens there. And then I'm also dipping back into You Are a Badass by Jen Sincero, which I read a few years ago, and I am actually listening to the audiobook and following along with my book because I am in desperate need of a kick in the butt and to sort of like shift focus and shift gears, and I'm all about making 2020 great. So I'm thoroughly enjoying listening to that again, and interestingly enough, highlighting a lot of the same passages the second time round. But I will let you guys know full thoughts on those books at the end of the month. But let me know what you're reading, if you have anything that you're just like totally loving right now, how your year started off with your reading. And if you are new here and haven't yet subscribed to the channel, definitely do that too. And feel free to give this a thumbs up if this is the kind of video that you guys like to see. But I will be back in a few days. I hope you will too. Thanks for spending some of your time with me today, and I will see you in the next one. Bye guys.